his 47th birthday, Tycoon Nathan Cole didn't crave a festivity. He simply sought solitude. And when he stumbled upon 3 identical 6-year-old girls on the pavement and the tokens they offered him, only then did he grasp that life's finest. Presents aren't wrapped in packages. They emerge from tiny palms. Before we dive in, share a comment below and tell us your location so we can greet you. Now, let's unfold the tale. Nathan Cole was merely 47, yet his gaze bore the burden of someone much older. To society, he was an icon, creator, and head of Cole Innovations, a billion-dollar tech empire based in Portland. His name adorned journal covers. His sayings fueled industry conferences, and his creations drove much of the nation's digital framework. People uttered his name with admiration, jealousy, or wonder. But behind corporate walls and skyscraper panes, Nathan dwelt in quiet. He wasn't always this way. Just 4 years prior, he was a dad, a joyful, naively content dad to a lively boy named Ethan. The lad had his mother's warmth and Nathan's inquisitiveness. They used to craft wooden forts on weekends and fly kites on the terrace. Those instances, brief, messy, and brimming with chuckles, meant more to Nathan than any deal or triumph. Then came the tragedy. A routine field trip, a faulty brake system, a phone alert that broke everything. Ethan was lost, and with him, the final spark of delight in Nathan's world. His spouse couldn't endure the sorrow. She departed not by passing, but by distance, moved away, vanished, took the light with her. Since then, Nathan merely existed, not truly lived. His birthday loomed, but no festivity was planned. No one dared suggest it. The man who once lit up every event had become a shadow in tailored attire, gleaming outwardly, empty inside. In public, he grinned. In private, he gazed out the window and pondered why destiny spared him. He possessed all wealth could acquire, except the one thing he'd traded all for: his son, and the capacity to feel anything at all. Every year on November 5th, the world seemed to halt around Nathan Cole, but not for joy, once filled with giggles and gifts shared with his son. It had turned into a day of eerie quiet since the tragedy 3 years ago. That morning, his loft stayed unnaturally calm, with drapes shut to block the daylight. He sat alone in his plush chair, staring at Portland's skyline, untouched breakfast cooling beside him. His aide had organized a subtle celebration as she did annually. Bouquets, handwritten notes from employees, a private supper booking at his favored eatery. But Nathan didn't even touch the envelope. He grabbed his phone and sent one message: cancel all plans. He didn't want the dessert. He didn't want the music or the forced grins of coworkers. Above all, he didn't want reminders that another year passed without hearing his son's voice. He strolled to the corridor, pausing briefly before the shut door of a room he hadn't entered in over a year. His hand lingered over the knob, but he couldn't muster the strength to turn it. Nathan Cole hadn't intended to leave his loft that morning. Not on his birthday. Not when every year since his son's passing felt like reopening a scar that wouldn't mend. But something about the silence in his lavish home felt denser than usual, as if even the walls grieved. He threw on an old navy coat, one he hadn't worn since his university days, and slipped out without his chauffeur or security. No phone, no aid, no plan. He just wandered. Portland's winter sky loomed low and somber, and a gentle mist blurred the lines between path and road. People hurried past him, umbrellas aloft, eyes fixed on their devices, unaware a tycoon brushed past them. Nathan didn't care. For once, anonymity felt like liberty. He roamed through lanes he hadn't seen in years, past shuttered shops and mural-covered walls. The chill pierced his coat, but he embraced the unease. It reminded him he still breathed. The rain grew icier, a fine haze cloaking Portland's streets in a gray, spectral glow. Nathan Cole turned down a quiet alley near the Pearl District, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets, his breath swirling in the air. He wasn't sure why he'd wandered this far, only that each step distanced him from the marble silence of his loft. And somehow, that felt fitting. He paused when he noticed movement beside a weathered stone wall. 3 small figures sat huddled together under a makeshift tarp canopy, their backs pressed close for warmth. A single tattered blanket draped their knees, and despite the breeze, none of them trembled. Nathan blinked. They looked identical. 3 little girls. Same golden locks matted under wool caps. Same round faces dusted with street grime. Same oversized coats wrapped around their slight frames. 6 years old, perhaps 7 at most. They sat in uncanny perfect alignment, as if this was their nightly ritual. He couldn't look away. One of them, he'd later learn, was Emma. Noticed him first. She nudged the others gently, and soon Lily and Grace turned their heads, 3 pairs of deep blue eyes fixing on his. They didn't speak. They didn't plead. They just watched. Nathan took a cautious step closer. "Hey," he said gently, almost unsure of the word. "Are you girls all right?" A moment passed. Then Lily, the one in the center, raised her chin. "We're okay," she said with surprising calm. "We're just waiting." "For what?" Nathan asked, kneeling slowly to seem less imposing. "For a kind soul," Grace mumbled. "Mama used to say, that's how you find safe havens." Nathan felt a stir in his chest. He didn't know if it was compassion, guilt, or something deeper, closer to sorrow. "Are you here alone?" Emma nodded. "Where's your mom and dad?" Nathan asked. Emma said softly, "Mom passed. She was ill. They took her to the clinic," but her voice faltered. "We haven't seen her since." Lily added, "They said we'd go to a shelter, but we were frightened. So we fled." Nathan's heart clenched. "How long have you been out here?" Grace glanced at her sisters, then shrugged. "2 birthdays." Nathan couldn't speak for a moment. Their answer didn't just strike him. It tore something open. 2 birthdays. They marked time not in days or weeks, but in how many birthdays they'd spent waiting. "Do you have any family?" he asked gently. Emma pulled a faded photo from her coat pocket, showing a woman with the same blonde hair and bright blue eyes. "Just Mama," she said. She said, "Daddy left before we were born. She didn't know where he went." Nathan felt a knot in his throat. He tried to form a reply, but none felt honest. "We don't ask for much," Lily said after a pause. "Just a grin or someone to wish us happy birthday when it's time." That's when it struck him. Today was his birthday. He hadn't told anyone, hadn't planned anything. But somehow, these girls, these 3 living mirrors of innocence, had mentioned it without knowing. He opened his mouth to speak, but Emma was already rummaging through a paper sack beside her. She pulled out a small square box wrapped in scraps of colored newspaper taped together with childlike care. She held it out. "We were saving this," she said. "We made it together. We planned to give it to Mama when she healed, but maybe you need it now." Nathan stared at the gift. He didn't deserve it. He, a man of boundless wealth, had drifted through life these past years a husk. And now 3 children with nothing, were offering him something crafted with their own hands and hearts. "I can't take this," he whispered. "But you're the kind soul," Grace said, smiling. "And kind souls need gifts too." He didn't take the box just yet. He knelt lower, eye level with all 3. "What are your names?" he asked. "Emma, Lily, Grace," they said in turn, their voices like notes of the same melody. Nathan blinked back tears. They didn't know it, but they had just rescued him, and he hadn't even opened the box. He glanced at the street, then back at them. "Can I take you somewhere safe? Somewhere warm?" They looked at each other, hesitant but trusting. Lily answered for all 3. "We don't go with strangers." Nathan knelt again, clutching the box to his chest. "So I'll come back tomorrow. Same time, and I'll bring hot cocoa and tails." They smiled. Okay, Grace said. But you better not forget. He laughed, a full, broken, healing laugh that sounded oddly familiar in his own throat. As he walked away, holding the gift, he didn't notice the sun peeking from behind the clouds. But they did, and they waved until he was gone. Nathan Cole stepped out of the elevator, the soft chime echoing off the granite walls of his loft. Rainwater pooled at his feet as he entered, his fine leather shoes drenched, and his tailored navy coat clinging to him like a second skin. He didn't bother turning on the lights. Portland's skyline flickered through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him, casting a cold, wavering glow over the sterile silence of the room. In his right pocket, heavy yet delicate, was a small box wrapped in scraps of colored paper. It crinkled when he sat on the edge of the bed, and he slowly reached in to retrieve it. The wrapping was uneven, creased in places, frayed at the edges, a few pieces held together with tape that had clearly been reused. Yet, it felt like the most precious thing he'd ever held. He placed it gently on his nightstand, but he didn't open it. Nathan stared at the gift for several minutes. He felt an urge, a strange tension, like the box was beckoning him. But another part of him shrank from the idea of disturbing it. There was something sacred about it, something beyond reason or explanation. The last time he'd felt anything close to this was the day his son was born. He leaned back, clothes still damp, head tilted toward the ceiling as if seeking answers in the shadows. His thoughts spun, still wrapped around what had just happened in that rain-soaked alley beside the Pearl District. 3 little girls, identical, blonde curls matted from the drizzle, cheeks rosy from the cold, hands clasped tightly together as if the world could only be faced united. Emma had been the first to speak, her voice quiet but warm. "Happy birthday," she'd said, offering a smile that carried both innocence and wisdom. He hadn't told anyone it was his birthday, not even his aide. And yet, she knew, or sensed, or perhaps just guessed, and got lucky. But somehow, it didn't feel like luck. It felt like destiny. Lily had stepped forward next. "We made this," she said, holding out the box as Grace stood behind her, half hiding, half curious. "We were saving it for someone who'd need it more than we did." And just like that, they gave it to him. Not begged, not bartered, just gave. No one had given Nathan Cole anything in a long, long time. Not without strings, not without expectation. Certainly not like this. These girls had nothing, not even matching shoes, but they gave freely, purely. That box wasn't just paper and glue. It was a gesture that cracked open something inside him that had been locked for years. Now, back in the cold silence of his loft, that crack widened. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached out, letting them hover just above the box on the nightstand. The paper had stick figures drawn on it. A smiling sun. A little house with 3 people holding hands. Crayon swirls in red, blue, and green. Emma's, Lily's, and Grace's, perhaps. Or maybe all 3 had worked together. Nathan found himself wondering what kind of childhood they'd had. Where were their parents? How long had they been on the streets? What did they eat? Where did they sleep when the wind roared and the city turned its back on children? His mind filled with possibilities, each more heart-wrenching than the last. He knew those thoughts would keep him awake, but oddly, he didn't mind. For the first time in years, his sleeplessness wasn't caused by regret, grief, or the relentless churn of business decisions. It was caused by 3 little girls who had looked at him and seen not a tycoon, not a CEO, but a man worth giving something to. He didn't want to ruin that moment by opening the box. Not yet. His phone buzzed on, the dresser, but he ignored it. It was probably a board member, a client, or some reporter desperate for a scoop. He didn't care. Tonight wasn't about the company, the press, or stock prices. It was about 3 tiny strangers who'd cracked open his soul like sunlight through storm clouds. Nathan stood slowly and moved to the closet. He peeled off his soaked clothes and changed into a plain gray sweatshirt and sweatpants. For a man who spent his life tailored and polished, he looked almost ordinary. He poured himself a glass of water, though his throat still felt tight. Walking back to the bedroom, he passed the framed photo on his hallway table. His son, Liam, smiling at the shore, sand on his nose, ice cream in hand. He stopped. Liam would have been 8 this year. He blinked hard. The triplets were 6, he recalled. Just a couple of years younger than Liam. Maybe that was why their presence struck him so deeply. Maybe it wasn't just their kindness. Maybe it was how they reminded him of the boy he'd lost. Or maybe they were a message, a second chance. He turned off the hallway light and climbed into bed, the city's glow spilling across the room. He stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, then turned to the nightstand. The gift was still there. He reached for it again, cradling it in his hands. He could feel the slight lump of something inside, probably something small, maybe a toy, a drawing, or even just a note. He could open it now. He had every reason to. But something inside whispered, "Not tonight. It's not time yet." He set it down gently, as if it might shatter. Then, without really thinking, he opened the top drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a silk handkerchief. He wrapped the box carefully, as if it were fragile crystal, and placed it back in the drawer with reverence. That box, whatever it held, was more than a gift. It was a reminder that kindness still existed in the smallest corners, that grace sometimes appeared unexpectedly, wearing worn-out shoes and carrying paper-wrapped wonders. That 3 little girls who had every reason to ask for something chose, instead, to give. As Nathan drifted into a restless sleep, one image clung to his mind. Emma, Lily, and Grace standing under the rain, hands interlocked, eyes hopeful. Their laughter, so faint it almost didn't exist, echoed through his memories, and though the gift remained unopened, his heart, after years of silence, had begun to open wide. The next morning, sunlight streamed across the city skyline. Nathan sat at the edge of his bed, freshly showered and in a crisp shirt. Yet unmoved, he reached for the box again. His fingers hovered over the edge of the wrapping paper, but again, he didn't pull. Instead, he pressed the box against his chest and closed his eyes. He saw them clearly. The girls hadn't asked for anything. Not food, not money, not shelter. Just the act of giving. That made the gift sacred. The box stayed on his nightstand that day and the next. By the 3rd day, he began a strange ritual. Each morning, Nathan would wake, shower, dress, and sit beside the box. Sometimes he'd speak to it quietly, like he was reaching someone far away. Lily looked at me the longest. He'd murmur, "I think she saw my pain." Other days, he'd simply touch the box's corner, feel the tape, the slight crunch of paper under his fingers. It wasn't just a gift anymore. It was a memory preserved in paper and tape, a moment of pure humanity in a world that had long felt mechanical. One morning, as the city hummed beneath him, Nathan picked up a pair of scissors. He didn't intend to open it. He just wanted to trim the edge where the paper had begun to peel. As he snipped the corner, something shifted inside the box. The faintest rattle. It was the first time he realized he didn't even know what was inside. His chest tightened. A stone, a sketch, a broken toy. Or worse, what if it was something they cherished and gave up just for him? Suddenly he couldn't breathe. That night, he paced the room with the box in hand. He couldn't put it down. It followed him from room to room like a fragile heartbeat. He placed it on the kitchen counter while he poured a drink, then carried it to the balcony as he watched the lights shimmer across the river. Eventually, he sat by the fireplace, the box perched on his knees like a treasure. And still, he didn't open it. By the end of the week, the gift had changed him. He answered his phone less. He canceled a meeting with shareholders just to walk through the Pearl District again, hoping to see blonde ponytails or hear a giggle. He even visited a nearby soap kitchen, asking if anyone had seen 3 6-year-old identical girls, but no one had. "Are you sure they weren't spirits?" a volunteer teased. Nathan almost nodded. Each night the box remained unopened, but something else opened within him. He found himself seeing the world differently. When a street vendor waved at a passing child, he smiled. When he saw a weary mother pushing a stroller through the rain, he stopped to offer his umbrella. It was as if not opening the gift preserved the purity of what it stood for: hope, kindness, and unspoken care. 2 weeks passed. He no longer needed an alarm clock. He woke thinking of the girls: Emma's boldness, Lily's gentleness, Grace's laughter. The loft still sparkled, but now it carried warmth. The cold luxury didn't suffocate him as it once had. And every morning, his hand found the box. One night after returning from a visit to a children's shelter, Nathan sat at his desk with the box before him. He leaned in close, breathing in the faint scent of old paper, dust, and crayons. Yes, there was a slight waxy scent. His heart skipped. Could they have drawn something? Did they leave a picture of themselves? Suddenly, the fear of knowing and losing that mystery paralyzed him. If he opened it and it was something small and forgettable, would the magic vanish? But if he never opened it, would he always wonder? He placed the box back on the nightstand. He whispered aloud, "I'm not ready." Then, after a pause, he added something he hadn't said in years: "Thank you." In the days that followed, Nathan began documenting what had happened. Not for publicity, not for a memoir, just for himself. He wrote about the box, the girls, and how their presence had awakened something dormant in him. Each word poured out like a confession, like a vow. And still, the box remained sealed, but not untouched. He held it every night, like a compass, like a heartbeat, like a treasure that didn't need to be opened to prove its worth. It was a morning when Portland was cloaked in a thick, low fog, rolling in from the river like a secret, winding through alleys and pressing against the windows of Nathan Cole's loft. But in his mind, there was only one thought. He had to go. Back. He didn't wait for his aid. He didn't call a driver. Instead, Nathan bundled 2 thick wool blankets under one arm, carried 3 large paper bags of warm breakfast, eggs, toast, bacon, and cartons of juice in the other, and drove himself to the Pearl District in his black SUV, the gift box from the night before still in his coat's inner pocket. His eyes scanned the sidewalk as he parked across the street. Even from the car window, he could feel his heart pounding. He looked toward the spot near the corner where the girls had been, where they had smiled and hummed, where Lily had given him the gift. But it was empty. No tarp shelter, no discarded blanket, no childish melody echoing against the cold stone walls, just a smudge of dirt where their tiny setup had been. Nathan stepped out of the car and approached slowly, like someone nearing the site of a loss they weren't ready to accept. "Maybe they're just getting food," he whispered aloud, trying to reason. He waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. A vendor across the street opened his stall. A man walked by with coffee in hand. Nathan clutched the paper bags tighter. Still nothing. He crossed to the nearest flower stall and gestured to the older woman arranging roses. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Did you see 3 little girls here yesterday evening?" "About 6. They looked exactly alike." The woman frowned, clearly trying to recall. "You mean the Triplets?" she said finally. "Yeah, they've been around the last couple of weeks, usually after dark. Sweet girls, always courteous." Nathan's heart leapt. "Do you know where they are now?" The woman shook her head. "No idea. I haven't seen them since yesterday. Sometimes they just vanish for days. It's like they live in the shadows." Nathan tried stall after stall. A baker said he'd given them a leftover pastry once. A barista said she'd seen them skipping past her shop window, humming softly. But no one knew where they slept. No one knew their last names. No one even knew if they had anyone looking for them. It hit him like a wave. They were truly invisible. He walked back to the place they'd been. His eyes scanned every detail. He found a tiny blue ribbon under the bench, one he remembered seeing in Emma's hair. He crouched and picked it up with trembling fingers. The dampness in the air made it stick to his palm, as if begging not to be left behind. He sat on the bench. The food he brought was still warm, but untouched. He opened one of the bags and placed 3 sandwiches down gently, side by side. They didn't come. Hours passed. Fog turned to drizzle, and drizzle turned to steady rain. People came and went, but not them. He pressed a hand to his chest. The feeling was worse than grief. It was fear. Not for himself, but for 3 little girls who had brightened his darkest night, only to vanish with the sunrise. By the time the sky darkened again, Nathan was soaked. The bags were empty, the blankets unused. His clothes clung to him like regret. That night, back in his loft, the silence was deafening. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but didn't drink it. He placed the ribbon on the nightstand beside the unopened gift box. Nathan Cole sat alone in his office. The lights dimmed, Portland's skyline glowing faintly behind him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The small, lumpy gift box, still wrapped in patchwork paper, rested quietly on the corner of his desk. He hadn't opened it. He couldn't. It wasn't just a box anymore. It was a vow, a symbol of something he didn't fully grasp yet, but knew he had to honor, and he couldn't keep waiting. He had returned to the same street corner for 7 days straight. He brought food, blankets, even new clothes. But the 3 little girls were nowhere. Emma, Lily, and Grace. He now knew their names by heart, could hear their identical giggles echo in his memory. The way they had shyly handed him the box and insisted, "It's for your birthday. We want you to smile today." They were gone. He had let them walk away that night, never imagining they'd disappear completely. But now, every instinct screamed they needed help. The next morning, Nathan summoned his most trusted advisor, Marcus Lane, and his longtime legal counsel, Sarah Lynn. "I want to find them," Nathan said firmly, no waver in his voice. "All 3 of them." Marcus frowned. "Who exactly?" "The triplets," Nathan said. "Emma, Lily, and Grace. 6 years old, blonde hair, same soft curls, same warm eyes. They live on the streets. I don't know how, but they found me, and I won't rest until I find them." Sarah leaned forward, voice cautious. "Nathan, there are thousands of homeless children across the country. This could be nearly impossible. I don't care how long it takes or how much it costs," he replied, eyes fierce. "This isn't about publicity. This is personal." Within 24 hours, a task force was formed. Nathan hired a top-tier private detective agency, discreet, skilled in missing persons. The team began by canvassing every shelter in Portland and nearby counties, checking records, talking to volunteers, distributing sketches based on Nathan's vivid descriptions. He gave exact instructions. No questions asked, no police unless necessary, no pressure, just help. He even drafted a reward notice, never posted publicly online. Instead, it was printed on discreet flyers handed to aid workers across Oregon. Missing 3 girls, age 6, blonde hair, triplets, first names, Emma, Lily, Grace, seen together, kind, brave, last known location, downtown Portland. Reward for information. No legal involvement unless safety is a concern. He didn't just want anyone to find them. He wanted them found safely, trusted. 3 days later, one of the investigators, Ryan Holt, called with a lead. A worker at St. Anne's shelter said they'd seen 3 girls matching the description. About a week ago, they came in during a storm, stayed one night. Nathan was there within the hour. The shelter was modest, run by a quiet nun named Sister Agnes. She led Nathan to a small back room where she'd let the girls sleep. They were sweet girls, she said. Polite. They sang a song together while eating soup. Broke my heart. Really? Did they say anything? They didn't give much information. Said their mom had gone to heaven and they were just trying to stay together. Did they say where they were going? Nathan asked. They mentioned something about a lady with green eyes who sometimes gives them sandwiches by the old church downtown. Nathan nodded slowly. Thank you, sister. That helps more than you know. Armed with that detail, the search expanded. Nathan added outreach workers who knew the local streets better than any detective. People who saw the invisible. Word quietly spread through soup kitchens, shelters, subway stations. A man is looking for 3 blonde girls, not the police, just a kind man. There's no danger, just hope. Tips trickled in. Some false, some vague, some eerily close. A man at the Burnside station claimed to have seen 3 tiny angels singing for spare change. A barista at a 24-hour diner said she'd seen them share a single muffin and run when a police officer walked in. Each story painted a clearer picture. The girls were still out there, together, avoiding attention, surviving. But for Nathan, each day without them grew more agonizing. He dreamed of them, those 3 little faces staring up at him, arms outstretched with that precious box. What had they endured to reach that moment? What were they enduring now? What if someone cruel had found them first? His staff began to worry. Nathan skipped meetings, ignored emails, canceled a keynote speech in San Francisco. This wasn't a distraction. It was his driving purpose. I lost my son, he told Marcus one night. I had everything and then nothing. But those girls, Emma, Lily, and Grace, they reminded me of what I was missing. Innocence, hope, humanity. I don't care what it takes. I will bring them home. One afternoon, a street guitarist named Milo came forward. He approached an outreach worker and said, I saw them. I'm sure of it. 3 blonde girls, same height. One had a torn blue coat. They sang with me for a bit, harmonized like angels. I gave them my tips for the day. Nathan met Milo personally. The man described their voices in detail. They called each other by name. Emma had the loudest laugh. Lily was shy. She watched people's shoes like she was deciding who to trust. And Grace, she kept looking up, like she was searching for someone. Where were they headed? Nathan asked. They mentioned something about a train. Said they wanted to ride to where the kind people live. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That night, after much debate, Nathan made a bold move. He published a carefully worded open letter in the Portland Tribune, syndicated nationwide, to the 3 girls who gave me the most important gift I've ever received, Emma, Lily, and Grace. If you see this, I'm still here. I still have your present. I haven't opened it yet. I won't until I see you again. You reminded me what it means to be seen, to be valued, and I want to return the favor. If anyone knows where they are, please help me find them. No questions, just love. After that letter, the response shifted. More volunteers joined the search. Churches held candlelight vigils. Hashtags emerged. Yours find the triplets. In Nathan's promise. Donations poured into shelters. For the first time, people didn't just see homeless kids. They saw Emma, Lily, and Grace. They saw their own children. And though the girls still hadn't been found, something had already changed in the world around them. Nathan often sat late into the night with the box in his lap, tracing the names he'd written on a notepad over and over. Emma, Lily, Grace. Not just names, anchors, promises, light. He didn't know where they were yet, but he knew they were worth everything. And now so did the world. Portland's skyline loomed gray and unyielding outside Nathan Cole's loft. But something inside him had changed forever. Days blurred into nights, and nights into long quiet reflections beside a small paper-wrapped box that still sat unopened on his nightstand. But this wasn't about what was inside the gift anymore. It was about the 3 little girls who had given it to him. 3 tiny voices, still fresh in his mind, had whispered in unison that day, "Happy birthday, mister." Their identical, blonde curls danced in the breeze. Emma, Lily, and Grace, 6 years old, fragile, radiant, and impossibly brave. He had walked into that day believing he was done with birthdays, believing he was done with life, really. But those girls gave him a reason to look forward again, and more importantly, to look outward. Nathan had built empires. He had raised a tech dynasty from his basement and turned it into a global force. But sitting across from 3 shoeless girls beneath a shop awning, he had never felt smaller or more human. The next morning, he stood at the window of his corporate tower, staring at the conference table below, the same one where he had once sealed a $3.2 billion merger. Now that room seemed absurd, cold, irrelevant. He sent a company-wide email that read simply, "Clear the way. 15th floor. Effective immediately. The conference room is no longer for sealing deals. It's for opening doors." Stunned executives gathered hours later as movers brought in cots, fold-out tables, and whiteboards instead of coffee carts and investor presentations. "What is this?" asked his CFO, a woman who had been with him since the start. Nathan stood at the head of the room, holding up a crumpled sketch drawn in crayon. 3 smiling stick girls, each labeled with their name in shaky, childish lettering. Emma, Lily, Grace. "This is who we work for now," he said. He called it the Lily Project. Though no one understood the name at first, it wasn't just about the triplets. It was about all the children like them. Children he had never seen and, worse, never bothered to. Lily, he explained, is every kid who gives more than they take. That week, they built a small shelter model inside the old boardroom. 10 beds, 2 meals a day, shower access, and learning programs. They brought in teachers, volunteers, and child psychologists. Nathan sat on the floor of the space the first night, watching as 5 kids curled up under clean blankets. Not one looked older than 10. All had names and stories. The media caught wind quickly. Billionaire CEO opens corporate shelter for homeless children. The headlines read. But Nathan refused interviews. "This isn't PR," he told his team. "This is atonement." The real twist came when he announced the next phase. He was liquidating $100 million of his personal assets to seed a national version of the Lily Project. His advisors pleaded with him to reconsider. "You're talking about giving up your vineyard in Sonoma, the yacht, the private plane." Nathan's voice was steady. "Those things never made me feel anything close to what I felt when Emma handed me that gift." Not everything went smoothly. The first satellite shelter in Seattle faced fierce backlash from local officials. "It'll attract more homeless families," critics warned. Nathan flew in personally, unannounced, and walked into the city council chamber holding a small wrapped box, the original gift. He set it on the table. "If I told you 3 little girls gave me this instead of asking for food or money," he said quietly, "would you still say they aren't worth helping?" There was silence, then a vote. The shelter was approved. Back in Portland, the office space was unrecognizable, once a sterile hub for suits and quarterly reports. It now buzzed with crayons, laughter, and the occasional wail from a child struggling to read their first sentence. Nathan spent less time on the top floor and more in the shelter. He helped serve breakfast. He wiped tears. He knelt beside a boy learning to tie his shoes and smiled like a proud father. "I don't know what I'm doing most days," he admitted to a counselor, "but I feel more alive than I have in a decade." One evening, as he walked past planning boards filled with shelter blueprints and handwritten notes from children, he stopped cold. Someone had posted a drawing on the wall, A new one. It showed 3 identical girls holding hands beneath a rainbow. One held a sign that said in crooked lettering, "Don't forget us." He reached out and touched the paper, tracing their smiles. He hadn't forgotten them. In fact, he thought of them constantly. But despite all efforts, private investigators, outreach campaigns, reward posters, Emma, Lily, and Grace remained untraceable, as if they had vanished into the mist the day they met him. Some days, he wondered if they had been angels sent to test him. One night, while reviewing shelter applications, he found one filed anonymously. It had no contact number, no address, just a short sentence scrawled in blue ink. "We're okay, Mr. Cole. We see what you're doing. Thank you." His breath caught. No signature, but he knew. He held the note in one hand and the unopened birthday box in the other. Tears came suddenly, uninvited. Not of grief, but of grace. This was more than charity now. This was purpose. This was legacy. Within 6 months, the Lily Project expanded to 12 cities. Within a year, it had helped over 4,000 children. But to Nathan, the numbers didn't matter as much as the one moment that started it all. He still hadn't opened the gift. The rain returned to Portland the same way it had a year ago. Soft and steady. As if time had looped back with a poetic sense of timing. For Nathan Cole, this day no longer meant board meetings or champagne toasts in glass towers. His birthday, once marked with extravagance, had become something quieter, heavier, sacred. He stood near the Pearl District, beneath the same rusted awning where the encounter had changed his life. His hair was damp, his coat clung to him, and his eyes scanned every face in the crowd. It wasn't hope he wore. It was a stubborn kind of faith. The tarp shelter was long gone. No sign of the little girls with paper-wrapped magic. No sign of Emma, Lily, or Grace. A low murmur of voices pulled him from his thoughts. Turning slowly, Nathan's heart stuttered. A group of children approached, hand in hand with parents, social workers, and volunteers. Dozens of them, some bundled in donated coats, others proudly wearing clothes with the Lily Project stitched across the chest. And they were smiling. "Mr. Cole!" shouted a boy, no older than 10, breaking into a sprint. He threw himself into Nathan's arms. "You helped my mom get a job!" Another child followed, then another. One girl carried a card made of blue construction paper that read, "Happy birthday, Mr. Cole," in crayon letters covered with glitter and crooked hearts. A woman stepped forward, her voice trembling. "I'm not sure you remember us. You paid our rent when we were evicted last Christmas. That gave me enough time to start over." Nathan blinked, overwhelmed. "Of course, I remember. How's Mia?" "Thriving. She's sleeping through the night now." For the next hour, the small, sidewalk corner became a sanctuary of celebration. The children who had once been faces in forgotten shelters were now messengers of joy. The cold concrete was softened by picnic blankets, thermoses of cocoa, and mismatched cupcakes. There was laughter. So much laughter. But Nathan's eyes kept drifting toward the empty space just beneath the overhang. A space that somehow still held 3 tiny shadows burned into his memory. As the afternoon dimmed into a cool blue dusk, one of his foundation staff leaned in. "We brought something," she whispered. From a weathered tote, she lifted 3 paper crowns. Faded, child-sized, carefully repaired with tape and care. Nathan's breath caught. He recognized them immediately. The triplets, Emma, Lily, and Grace, had each worn one. They weren't store-bought but handmade, scrawled with their names in smudged marker. The crowns had been left behind in the foam shelter box when they disappeared. He took them slowly, as if touching relics. That day had never left him. He could still see Emma's bright blue eyes as she asked, "Do you like surprises?" Or Lily's giggle when she told him the box was guarded by Princess Magic. Or Grace, the quiet one, who had placed the gift gently in his lap and whispered, "It's okay if you don't open it yet." They had given him something no empire ever could, an anchor. And yet, they were still gone. Nathan sat on the edge of a planter box beside the market wall. The gift still lay in his nightstand drawer, untouched, a promise made and kept, but not fulfilled. As evening rolled in, people began packing up. There were hugs, waves, and promises to visit the new shelter being built downtown. Volunteers loaded leftover food into vans. Still, Nathan remained, staring at the quiet street. Suddenly, a flash of blue caught his eye. Then yellow, then lavender. 3 little girls walked in single file across the street, their blonde ponytails bouncing in sync. Each wore a handmade crown. Not the same ones, but identical in shape and style. Nathan froze. He stood slowly, heart pounding against his ribs. They were closer now. The girls were 6, maybe just turned 7. Their hair was lighter than before, curled from the rain. Each had a backpack, worn and dotted with cartoon patches. He couldn't breathe. Emma, Lily, Grace. But then they turned, and for a terrible second, his chest collapsed. It wasn't them. Just another set of siblings guided by their mother toward the bus stop. He smiled at them gently as they passed. The oldest one waved. He waved back, with an ache. He didn't try to hide it. As the street emptied again, Nathan leaned his head back and closed his eyes. He whispered, "Where are you girls?" No answer. Just the whisper of wind, the distant cry of seagulls, and the soft hum of the city. For all his wealth, for all his influence, he couldn't bring them back. Not yet. But that didn't mean he'd stop looking. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photo he always carried now. It wasn't taken by a camera, but drawn by a child at one of the shelters. It showed him sitting on the ground, surrounded by 3 girls with crowns. Beneath it, in messy handwriting, were the words, "You didn't open it, but you opened your heart." That night, he returned to the loft, now less pristine, more lived in. Crayon drawings covered the fridge. A teddy bear one of the shelter kids forgot sat on his couch like a guest. And on the nightstand, in the same place since last year, sat the box. He held it gently. The corners were softer now. The wrapping paper faded just a little, but the tape still held, and the shape was still the same. Lumpy, imperfect, irreplaceable. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at it in the dim light. A knock startled him. He opened the door to one of the foundation interns. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Cole," she said. A note was just slipped under the office door. Nathan's brow furrowed. He took the envelope and thanked her. Inside, on a folded piece of blue paper written in crayon, were 6 words. "We remember your laugh. PLG." His hands trembled. He read it again, then a 3rd time. The handwriting slanted, familiar. The initials, the simplicity. It was them. It had to be. He stood in the middle of the room, stunned, elated, terrified, all at once. Were they near? Had they seen him today? Were they safe? A million questions flooded in, none with answers. But one thing was clear. They knew. They remembered. And somehow, they were watching. Nathan looked back at the gift box on the nightstand. He walked over, lifted it slowly, and placed it inside a glass case, still unopened, still sacred. Because, now, more than ever, he understood. Some gifts don't need to be opened. Some gifts are reminders. And some gifts, 3 of them to be exact, were out there somewhere, wearing paper crowns and carrying pieces of his heart in their small hands. He would find them. And until he did, he would carry their love in silence. A love wrapped in paper. A love that never faded. A love that changed everything. The tulips bloomed early that spring. It had been exactly 1 year since Nathan Cole received the small, hand-wrapped box from 3 little girls on the sidewalk. Emma, Lily, and Grace. Blonde, identical, unforgettable. He never opened that gift. He couldn't. Not until he found them again. He had tried. God knows how hard he had tried. The triplets had vanished like whispers in the rain, leaving only a memory, a paper-wrapped box, and a man who had once been a tycoon but now lived with the aching emptiness of almost rescued them, almost helped, almost found them. But this spring was different. The air in Seattle was crisp as Nathan stepped out of his private SUV in front of the newest branch of the Lilly Foundation, his nonprofit now operating in 27 cities across the U.S., serving thousands of children monthly. His staff greeted him warmly, and he smiled. But behind that smile, a quiet longing stirred. This wasn't just a PR visit. It was personal. Nathan walked through the gates into the garden courtyard of the shelter, where kids laughed and played beneath fluttering ribbons and balloons. Spring Festival, they called it. For many of these children, it was their only celebration all year. He passed a table of face painters, a line for ice cream, and a handmade booth labeled Make a Wish. His heart warmed seeing all the children, each one clothed, fed, and loved. Something he couldn't be sure Emma, Lily, and Grace had received. He still saw their faces in his dreams. 3 pairs of blue eyes, 3 smiles that had shaken him to the core. He was about to turn toward the main hall when he heard it. Laughter, high-pitched, melodic, familiar. He froze. His head snapped toward the sound. It came from under the wisteria arbor at the garden's far end. A cluster of kids gathered there, but 3 stood out. 3 little girls sat on a bench, wearing matching pastel dresses. Their golden hair glimmered in the sun. Their feet didn't quite touch the ground. One held a lollipop, one had a butterfly drawn on her cheek, and one was braiding the other's hair. Triplets. Nathan's heart skipped. Could it be? He walked slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the moment might evaporate if he moved too fast. His breath caught in his throat. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding louder than the children's laughter. Then one of them looked up and stopped mid-laugh. Nathan froze. It was her, Emma. Or was it Lily or Grace? Her eyes widened. She tapped the others quickly, and all 3 turned in unison to face him. "Do you remember me?" he asked, voice trembling. There was a beat of silence then. "You didn't open the gift," one of them said. Nathan staggered back as if struck. The same voice, the same words they had whispered that night beneath the street lamp. "You'll open it when you find us," they had said. He fell to his knees before them. "Where have you been?" he choked. "I looked everywhere. I never stopped." The girls rushed forward, hugging him, all 3 at once, little arms wrapping around his shoulders, neck, and back. "We knew you were looking," said Lily. "Or was it Emma? We saw your face on TV. You helped other kids, so we waited." "Where?" Nathan asked, his voice hoarse. "Where did you go?" Grace, he remembered the slight dimple on her left cheek, spoke this time. "A kind lady found us sleeping in a laundry room. She brought us here. We didn't tell them about you. Not right away." "Why not?" "Because we wanted to know if you really meant it," Lily said softly. "If you'd still want us, even if you had everything again." Tears stung Nathan's eyes. He tried to speak, but no words came. Behind them, staff began to notice the commotion. "Clara!" The branch director rushed over. "Mr. Cole, are you all right?" "These girls," Nathan pointed breathless. "They're the reason this all exists. They're the ones." Clara blinked. "You mean these are your girls?" Nathan nodded. For a long time, no one moved. Then Clara knelt, speechless, staring at the 3 girls. They told us almost nothing. Just their names. No last name. No background. No family. "They're my family now," Nathan whispered. He stood and turned to the triplets. Do you still want to come with me? Not just visit, but home. The three girls looked at each other. Emma grinned first. Lily nodded. Grace reached for his hand. We never stopped waiting, Grace said. That night, Nathan didn't return to his loft. Instead, he stayed in the guest wing of the Seattle shelter, sleeping on the floor with three giggling girls curled up in blankets around him. They told him stories. He told them some back. He promised pancakes in the morning. And just before they fell asleep, Emma whispered, "You still haven't opened it." Nathan smiled. "I wanted to wait until you were there." The next morning, under the golden warmth of spring sunlight, Nathan sat with the girls at a table in the garden. He pulled out the faded gift box he had carried every day for a year. The wrapping was a little more crumpled now, the tape yellowing. He unwrapped it slowly, carefully, as if it were made of porcelain. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, 3 crayons, and a small origami heart. He opened the paper. It read in shaky handwriting, "Dear Mister, we don't know if you're rich or not, but we hope you're kind. If you open this, it means you still believe in good people. Please don't forget us. Love, Emma, Lily, Grace." Nathan stared at the note, chest heaving. The girls leaned in close, their heads on his shoulder. "I'll never forget you," he said, voice cracking. "Never again." Later that week, headlines read, "Billionaire finally finds lost triplets who changed his life, and they're home to stay." The legal process was a maze, frustrating, dehumanizing, cruel. Nathan, once a man who could sign off billion-dollar acquisitions with a smile, now spent sleepless nights filling out paperwork, making calls, and facing endless questions from social workers. "Why you?" one attorney asked coldly. "There are shelters and state facilities prepared for this. I'm not here because I pity them," he said, voice trembling. "I'm here because I was meant to find them. I need them as much as they need me." The first night they arrived at, his home was unforgettable. His loft, once silent and clinical, was suddenly alive with noise, squeals, laughter, footsteps running up and down the polished wooden floors. The girls had never seen so many lights. They'd never touched carpet so soft. They insisted on sharing one bed, though he had set up separate rooms for each. "We've always slept together," Lily explained. "We get scared alone." Nathan stood by the doorway as they curled up in the middle of the California king-size bed, arms and legs tangled like puppies. A warmth settled in his chest that no amount of wealth had ever given him. That night, he didn't sleep in his own room. He sat just outside their door, listening to their breathing, the occasional whispered story, and once, so soft it almost didn't exist, a quiet, "I think I like him." The days that followed were filled with questions. "Do we have to leave again?" "No," he answered firmly. "You're staying. Do you have a real job?" He chuckled. "Yes, but I'll always come home in time to tuck you in." "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" "Every night if you want." But the hardest question came from Grace, the quietest one. "Are you going to disappear too?" He knelt down, leveled his eyes with hers, and said, "Not ever. Not unless you tell me to go. And even then, I'll stay right outside the door." Now, back in the courtroom, Nathan held his breath as the judge looked over the final documents. "Mr. Cole," she said slowly, "are you prepared to accept full legal guardianship and responsibility for these 3 minors?" He glanced down at the girls. Lily was clenching his pinky tightly. Grace had drawn a tiny heart on the back of his hand with her blue marker. Emma, sitting between them, looked up with fierce pride. "I'm not just prepared," he said, voice catching. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The courtroom was still. Then came the words he had prayed for. "This court grants you permanent guardianship and full adoptive rights. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole." Before he could react, all three girls threw their arms around him at once. A small, chaotic bundle of joy. Lily pressed her cheek into his shoulder. Grace whispered, "Does this mean we're safe now?" And Emma, proud and brave, said, "Does this mean we're Coles now?" He pulled them closer. "It means you're mine, and I'm yours." Back home, they had a celebration. Not with champagne or caviar, but with juice boxes, pizza, and a homemade cake with Dad Birth 3 written in shaky icing. They danced around the living room in their new pajamas, their laughter echoing off the high walls that had once held only silence. Nathan filmed every second on his phone, vowing never to forget a single moment. They asked to sleep in his bed that night. Just for tonight, they promised. They stayed for a week. He didn't mind. The following morning, Emma gave him something wrapped in the same kind of paper they'd used for that mysterious gift box a year ago. He smiled. Inside was a crayon drawing. 4 stick figures, 3 girls and 1 tall man, with hearts all around them. Above the drawing were the words, "Our real home now." Nathan didn't cry often, but he cried that morning. Months passed. He withdrew from his board position and created a new nonprofit, 3 Stars Foundation, named for Emma, Lily, and Grace. Its mission: housing and protecting children in homelessness across America. But more than that, he built a home, not just of walls and ceilings, but of bedtime stories, giggles in the kitchen, shared pancakes, and whispered secrets under the covers. And the gift box the 3 little girls had given him still sat untouched on his nightstand. He never had to look inside. The real gift was already open, living, breathing, and now sleeping in the next room. Nathan Cole had once dreaded birthdays. They were silent, hollow reminders of loss and years that passed without meaning. But not this year. Not on his 49th birthday. Because this year, the attic of his home echoed with giggles, the sweet scent of frosting, and the patter of 3 pairs of tiny feet. The little attic, converted long ago into a private reading space, had become the center of Nathan's world. Its warm wooden beams and slanted windows now glowed with soft lantern light, casting golden shadows that danced along the ceiling. On the floor sat 3 blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls with frosting on their fingers and glitter in their hair, identical in every way, but full of their own little personalities. The triplets, Emma, Lily, and Grace, had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. They were 6 years old, but each carried a light that could melt even the hardest winter. "Daddy!" cried Emma, the boldest, racing across the attic rug with a lopsided crown made of construction paper. "You forgot to wear your birthday hat." She climbed onto his lap, jamming the slightly squashed paper crown onto his salt and pepper hair. Lily and Grace ran after her, arms full of handmade decorations. A banner that read, "Happy B-Day, Dad" in crayon, and a bouquet of yellow daisies carefully taped together. Nathan laughed, a sound that once felt foreign, now as familiar as breath. "You 3," he said, pulling them close, "are the greatest gift I've ever been given." "No," Grace said with mock offense, her face scrunching up. "You're not supposed to say that yet. We haven't even sung the song." Lily, always the quiet one, tugged gently at his sleeve. "Daddy, we made a cake all by ourselves." "By yourselves?" He gasped dramatically. "Should I be worried?" She grinned proudly and pointed toward a small table in the corner. On it sat a somewhat lopsided chocolate cake, the top thick with uneven layers of frosting, crushed marshmallows, rainbow sprinkles, and something that looked suspiciously like cereal. Emma saw the concern in his eyes. "We didn't put pickles in it this time." Nathan tried not to laugh. "That's very reassuring." He let them lead him to the table, each girl holding one of his hands as if escorting a king to his throne. The attic wasn't grand. It wasn't where parties were supposed to be held, especially not for a man worth billions. But here, In this creaky, sun-warmed space filled with mismatched chairs, paper hearts taped to the walls, and the smell of childhood, it was perfect. He sat down before the cake. They lit 5 candles. "Because you're too old for all 49, Emma explained, and then the girls huddled together. 1, 2, 3, Lily whispered. Then, in shaky unison, they sang, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Daddy, happy birthday to you." The final note was drawn out, shrill, and hilariously off-key, but to Nathan, it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He closed his eyes and made a wish. Not for wealth, not for power, not for anything more than what he already had. When he opened them, the girls were watching him intently. "What did you wish for?" Grace asked, her eyes wide. "If I tell you," he said, leaning in close, "it won't come true." "Is it us?" Emma asked, her voice suddenly tender. Nathan nodded. "Always." They devoured the cake together, laughing when Emma dropped a glob of frosting on her foot, and when Grace announced she'd lost another tooth. "But I swallowed it by accident, so the tooth fairy's gonna need proof." Lily, the tidy one, tried her best to clean up, but her sisters kept sneaking frosting onto her nose. Then came the presents. Each girl had wrapped something in old newspapers tied with yarn and decorated with stickers. Emma's gift was a rock she'd painted silver. "It's lucky," she declared. "You're supposed to carry it everywhere." Lily gave him a drawing of the 4 of them standing in a field under a rainbow. "I made sure everyone's hair was right this time," she said, pointing to the smudges where she'd used actual blonde hair from a brush. Grace, the most sentimental, gave him a small wooden box she'd found at a yard sale, filled with buttons, feathers, and a note that said, "For when you miss us, but also for always." Nathan blinked fast, trying to hold back tears. No watch, no sports car, no gala could compare to these. After cake and gifts, the girls took turns putting on a show for him. Emma danced ballet in socks. Lily read a poem she wrote that started serious and ended with a joke about butts. And Grace sang a lullaby her mom once taught her. Soft, haunting, full of unspoken history. Nathan sat there, hands clasped, watching the girls through blurred vision. Just a few years ago, he hadn't known what he was living for. Just a few years ago, he was a man with a sealed birthday gift from girls he couldn't find. Now, in his attic-turned-palace with triplet daughters who each called him daddy in slightly different tones, he understood everything. It wasn't charity that brought him to them. It wasn't rescue. It was fate. The memory of the 3 little girls who had changed his life with a single box still clung to his heart, but through their gift, it had somehow led him to Emma, Lily, and Grace. He remembered the moment he saw them, the way they clung to each other like fearless birds. He knew then, without a doubt, they were meant to be his, and today proved it. As the evening light turned the attic golden orange, the girls curled beside him with full bellies and frosting smudged cheeks. Emma snuggled into his left arm, Lily on his right, Grace in his lap. Their identical heads of golden hair rested peacefully against him as he read a chapter from their favorite book aloud. And the king looked out over his land. But nothing was more precious than the laughter he heard in his own home. Nathan's voice grew quieter. Lily blinked sleepily. "Daddy?" "Yes, baby." "Can we have birthdays every day?" He smiled. "We'd run out of cake." "That's okay," said Grace. "You already gave us the best present." "What's that?" "You." Tears slipped from his eyes before he could stop them. He kissed the crown of her head, then Emma's, then Lily's, and in that moment, sitting on an old attic floor with 3 little girls who turned his world right side up, Nathan Cole finally truly believed in miracles. Not the kind found in billion-dollar ventures, not the kind brokered in boardrooms, but the kind that arrived softly, barefoot, with yellow hair and mismatched socks. bearing lumpy cakes and drawings with too much glitter. And as he blew out those 5 crooked candles, he not only made a wish, he found himself living that wish. We'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and rate this story from 10 to 100. Tell us where you're watching from too. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if this touched your heart, check out more uplifting videos by clicking on the end screen now.